All right, 2020 is a census year, and the census is enormously important, particularly to communities throughout the country. You want to make sure that we are not undercounted and services are not diminished in our communities. Nicole Yearwood is visiting us this morning. She's the Senior Partnership Specialist and Field Director for the New York Regional Census Center of the U.S. Census Bureau. We're going to welcome her right now.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. I'm going to get right into it. So the census is safe, it's easy, and important. It's safe because all of our data is protected by law under United States Code Title 13. All the data that the Census Bureau collects is private and confidential. We want to make sure that the community understands that we are unique and that we don't share information with any other city, state, or federal agency, or we face 5 years imprisonment and a $250,000 fine. We all take that oath as Census Bureau employees. The census is going to be easy. For the first time, you'll be able to complete the census 4 ways: online, by phone, using the traditional form, and with a census taker. But we want to be clear, there's 4 ways. And when we say online, we mean on all mobile devices and computers. It is important, as was stated before I came here, representation in our government depends on our response to the census. If we do not respond, we will not have the appropriate number of congressional seats. This is how congressional seats are distributed throughout the country using census data. Then we go into the process called redistricting. The data is also used to redraw district lines for Congress, our state legislatures, as well as our local municipal governments. The other reason why it's important is because $675 billion in federal funding is distributed based on census data to programs like Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, food stamps, WIC, Title I funds to local educational institutions, Head Start funding, child health insurance programs, community development block grants, highway and infrastructure programs, and many more. If our communities are not counted, we will be underrepresented and underfunded for 10 years. This data sits for 10 years. You can help us avoid frauds and scams by calling 800-932-8282. We also want to add that the Census Bureau does many other surveys in between the years ending in 0. And even if you completed one of those surveys this year, we need you to complete the census next year. It's in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution that we do an enumeration of the population for the purposes of apportionment. So every 10 years, ending in 0 since 1790, we have counted every resident in the United States. I repeat, we count every resident of the United States. We also have a great website where you can find information and help us share it with the communities that you serve at 2020census.gov. We also have employment opportunities available with competitive pay, flexible hours, and paid training. That information can be found at 2020census.gov.jobs 2020census.gov/JOBS. We also want you to know that you can partner with us. You can become part of a complete count committee. The requirements for the positions that we have, you only need to be 18 years of age or older, have a valid social security number, be a citizen or green card holder. We have some flexibility around that. Men over the age of 18 born after 1959 must be registered with Selective Service. And you just need a valid email address. You fill out the application, you answer 30 questions. If you're interested in a supervisory position, you will answer 9 more, and that's it. So please visit our website, 2020census.gov, for more information, and follow us at U.S. Census Bureau on all social media handles. And again, to report any fraud you suspect or scams, 800-932-8282 and 2020census.gov/jobs. If you're interested, please apply now. Thank you.
That's very important that you pay attention to the census. That only comes around every 10 years. You can see what happened last time. During 2010, a lot of the states gerrymandered districts, and that's why we're having the problems we're having now. People realize how serious the census is. What do you think, Graham?
Well, it's very important because all federal funding
Right.
is promulgated on the census.
Right.
The House of Representatives, there's one representative for every 100,000 people.
Right.
And if we don't have correct numbers, then you're misrepresented. Maybe there should be an additional representative for the state.
Right.
And if people are not filling out the census, then we miss out. Very critical with this impeachment process. It was the
Right.
House of Representatives that impeached the president. Those are the people who are congressmen and congresswomen who represent us. Switch off, the mic is out.
My mic?
Is out.
All right. Well, we're live from Manhattan Neighborhood Network. You know, if there's something happening, it'll happen when you're live. All right, so as soon as we're waiting for two other guests to come in, and they should be here momentarily. But the census is so very important. As you heard Nicole speak about, you know, there's, I forget how many billions it was, 680
billion.
$680 billion is allocated according to how many people, according to how many people you have in your particular district. So those of you that are hiding from whoever, you don't need to hide because this censor is completely exclusive. Nobody can track you down through the census. This is illegal to pass on information from the census, as you heard in this piece. What another important things are, what, Graham?
Well, with the impeachment of the president, the House of Representatives, those numbers of those representatives come from the census. So let's say Brooklyn has 2.1 million people. So for every 100,000 people, there is a congressman or a congresswoman to cover that area. When people fail to report their presence in the city, then we miss out on getting an additional representative. Those numbers are critical when it comes to something like an impeachment or even passing a bill, passing a tax bill. Senators and congresspersons vote legislatively on the things that are going to affect us. So they're now in Iowa. There were only 3 million people in the entire state of Iowa.
Right.
Not many state representatives in Iowa, or congresspersons in Iowa, compared to New York City.
But yet they get 2 senators.
They got, yes. Well, that's all the states,
That's the
each state
imbalance.
gets 2, and the congresspersons are to represent the more populated areas.
Now there's an injustice there, where you've got a state with 3 million people, right? And they get 2 senators.
Yes,
for that
but they only
particular state.
have, remember,
But
they
I
only,
mean, that's not being represented by population.
no, the senators have nothing to do with population.
I know.
The House of
I'm saying
Representatives
the
goes.
injustice of a small state like that getting 2 senators.
Well, the deal was when Hamilton and Jefferson and the founding members of the U.S. Constitution, they were trying to pair it out. Jefferson wanted greater representation. Hamilton wanted exclusive. So that was the trade-off. They said every state would get 2 representatives in the Senate. Conversely, by population, you get 1 congressperson for every 100,000 people. So as populations have shifted, for instance, after World War II, a lot of blacks moved up They moved up to Detroit. They went to Philadelphia, came to New York, Chicago. The populations of those southern states dropped as the increase went to the northern states. So there were more congressmen and women in the northern states as people took that exodus north. So when they do the census, the following census, they find out they lost X millions of people. Where did they go? They went north to the urban cities. So that increased the representation for the people in the northern cities. And also the funding, the federal funding. She mentioned Title I. Those are federal programs for our children in the public schools.
That's right.
Title I funds, daycare, Head Start programs, very critical in order to get funding. New York receives over $200 million in funding from the federal government. Well, they used to get around $200 million. They were caught cheating and stealing, so they now fund directly to a lot of the Head Start centers. And that was a safeguard for the people, because the city was siphoning money off. That was federal money. They were siphoning the money off, and the children were not getting the monies that they should get. So it's very important, especially for young couples with children. That Head Start money is crucial to help run those programs, to pay the salaries, and thank God now the salaries for the Head Start teachers have jumped up considerably.
Well, if you saw in that piece there, they were asking for workers. So anybody that wants to get a job, you know, working for the Census Bureau, I think they pay $16 an hour.
I'm not sure
more
what the
than
pay
that.
is.
No, $25 an hour, I heard. All right, so you've got that 2020census.gov, right? And just go to the website and see whether you get involved and make some money. And if you're sitting there idly by with no job, and you're contributing to your community and bringing in the funds that are badly needed in our community, which we don't count the numbers, whereas we can receive these funds. We're always complaining about lack of service in our community. It's because the people aren't counted properly. I mean, we're all running from somebody, but this data is not shown. It's against the law to, excuse me, to present or transfer data from the Census Bureau. That's against the law to transfer data from the Census Bureau.
Right.
So everybody should understand that. What about the political scene, Graham? Are you following this at all? Let's talk about
I will
our
say,
buddy.
very impressed by Schiff.
Oh, God, yes.
Very impressed
Oh, my
by
goodness.
Jeffries
Oh, man.
and all of the members of that team. They work as a unit.
Yeah.
They're direct and to the point. They are not coming up to the podium to engage in a diatribe. They're there to make that presentation and go back to their seat. Conversely, the Republicans, the attorneys for the president,
Yeah.
they keep talking about everything but the issue.
Yeah.
Everything but the
You
issue.
have to follow that.
The issue is abuse of power.
And they're saying that's not a...
They're saying it's not a crime. Well, we arrest people for abusing people. We arrest parents for abusing their children. The presidency is an office which is granted to an individual on behalf of the people.
Right.
Now, they say it's not a crime. Well, you don't have to commit a crime to be removed from office.
Or impeached.
Right? Or impeached. Not at all. They talk about quid pro quo.
But this is criminal.
It is criminal.
But there isn't article of impeachment. First article is abuse of power.
Abuse of power.
The second power on the abuse of Congress.
Well,
Now that's obvious. Why are they
that
fighting
is
back
one.
over that?
And also, there's a third point that was mentioned. The abuse of power. Oh gosh, it'll come back to me. But what Donald Trump has signified from the very beginning. He said, I can shoot a woman on Fifth Avenue
And it's
and
true.
nobody will do anything. See, he's been testing the waters And a lot of his cronies and followers, they follow that mindset.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he could not shoot somebody. Nobody can shoot somebody, because if that were true, then we're moving into anarchy.
Right.
Donald Trump believes that he has unlimited power, that he can do whatever he wants. That is not true. The founding fathers wrote and spoke adamantly about it, because this is not a monarchy. It's a representative government wherein the president has control of one of three branches of government. He doesn't control all three branches of government. And it's interesting with the Supreme Court Justice Roberts sitting there. I wonder what he really wants to say, listening to some of the comments coming from the senators. To say that he attempted to do something. Well, he didn't do it, you know, it didn't succeed. People go to prison for attempted murder.
That's right.
I've arrested a lot of people for attempted one thing or the other. The fact that you failed in your effort doesn't exonerate you from the crime. It's a lesser charge, lesser time, but the fact is there was an overt act. Once there is an overt act, the crime is tenable.
What do you think about the defense that they're giving? They're saying that they should have asked for witnesses, they should have asked for Bolton in the House, and instead of rushing it through to get it finished by Christmas, which was the problem with going through the courts, is that they're tied up in the courts now trying to get one of Trump's lawyers on. I forget the fellow's name.
You know,
Boehner? Not Boehner.
I didn't understand everything that Nancy Pelosi was doing,
But it makes a lot of sense now.
she's shrewd. She's
Because she
very
knew
shrewd.
something was coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Everybody, I mean, Bolton is just offended by what Trump did. And that's obvious. Because anybody brazen enough to call up a foreign leader and ask them to do him a favor, withhold $400 million,
$400 million.
$391 million to fight Russia, who's Putin is Trump's buddy.
And consider,
And
people
so-
are dying.
Yeah.
You know, soldiers are dying. Granted, there's a war, there's a conflict, people die.
Right.
But to fail to assist an ally or a
Right.
friend because you want something from them under the guise of a criminal act, and it is some yarn that's been spun.
What about what Giuliani's been doing?
And
I mean,
that too.
why
He's
isn't he
running
gonna be
around. He's not
indicted
an
soon?
official. He's not an official. He could be indicted. The Southern District is
But
looking
why,
at indicting him as
If
well.
all these senators see, I can't understand how they can line up and stay in check and lockstep the way they do, and they can see the lies. I know. It's just unbelievable.
You know
how
the term
Graham-
follow the money?
Yeah, but Graham, Lindsey Graham. I mean, what a hypocrite! And right in front of us, he turns. I mean, you go back to the beginning where they ran in the primaries, and you think about all the stuff that Trump said about all these guys. And once he was in power, they just laid down and bowed to the king.
Well, did you
This
hear
is
about
amazing.
McConnell
Oh,
and the Russian oligarch?
Moscow
So
Mitch.
Moscow Mitch,
He's got $200 million for his state.
for his state, because the Russian oligarch moved the factory into Kentucky, where there are a lot of unemployed people.
Right.
So now they have jobs,
No,
and
no,
they're happy, and they're thankful to the great Russian for bringing the business there so they can have jobs.
well, I don't think they know it's the Russians. They think it's Moscow and Mitch.
Well, but it's what Mitch did, and nobody's really hitting home on that point.
And his wife is dealing with the Chinese.
And she's right. Now you look at Trump, his daughter got contracts with the Chinese. All of this is about money, it's about power, and they would have you think that the general public is so stupid. The guy from Harvard,
Which one?
the attorney from Harvard, I can't remember his name, he had been involved in the Clinton trial and advocated against Clinton for what he did for lying about Monica Lewinsky. Now he's defending Trump because he said these are not impeachable offenses. Granted, what Clinton did on a moral scale was terrible. He took no actions against the country. He lied. He lied.
It's offensive that they compared it to, really.
Right, and that's the point that I'm coming to. That was an issue for he and his wife to get resolved, but it wasn't something that was going to impact the country in the way that Trump is wheeling and dealing with these Russians. And even to seek to get a story whipped up. Let's talk about Biden, his son. Granted, no, he didn't know anything about any of that business.
I have a theory that he was there watching over our interests.
And
make sure there was no corruption.
Right, so we have some nepotism. He got in there because his father is...
I really believe he was there watching the store.
But to think that
do
he
you
was
believe
there...
that? Why
I do
was
think he was probably there to monitor.
Right.
And also, on the election, they had to get rid of the corruption. U.S. was not going to give money.
Right.
In light of the corruption that was going on. The last premier that they had, I remember when they got into his mansion, and his mansion is now a museum because the people broke in and they saw everything that was in there. They turned it into a museum. He fled. Where did he flee to? He went to Russia.
That's right.
All right? So this president,
the president,
the former one, this president now.
Well, that's why Russia got so angry.
Precisely. Now you got to remember, the ports of Ukraine are very important to the Russians for the shipment of oil as well.
That's right. That's why they snatched Crimea.
Precisely.
Well, you might bring up the point that Ukraine is the biggest country in Europe. It's huge. And it was once part of the Soviet Union.
Right.
So that fell in 91, was it?
When 91, Putin was in the KGB. He was a KGB officer. He was very upset over the fact that we had helped to collapse his government. Right. And he's had that in his craw ever since. Trump talks about strongmen. He likes Z. He likes Putin, the guy over in the Philippines who was killing the drug dealers. Right. He models these people. No, not Ken Starr. The guy from Harvard. Bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get the guy from Harvard. He was on today. He was on The View, as a matter of fact, this morning. They had him on a split screen. But he is saying that basically the president can pretty much do whatever he wants. And remember, the law is broad. Right. The way that the founding fathers laid out the Constitution, they didn't say the president can't cross the street against a light. Right. It's a broad scope of things to be defined by the courts and by the Congress of the United States in that given time. For instance, at the time that the Constitution was written, slavery was not a problem.
Right.
All right? Washington owned slaves, Jefferson owned slaves. There was nothing saying a president. Right. So things have changed over the years. What was not a crime then is a crime now. And there are crimes that we have on the books that did not exist in the 1700s. So we have to look at everything relative to the social makeup of the country and the time that we are in. It is not acceptable for a leader of this country to be doing what he was doing to rig an election. Right. He is worse than what Nixon did with the Watergate scandal. You're going out of the country. He's got Giuliani running around spinning yarn overseas. He's not a registered representative of the United States. He doesn't work for the State Department.
That's right.
He works solely for the President of the United States, and he believes he has exclusive right to do it.
But these guys did this kind of stuff in New York for years.
Yeah. Well,
when Giuliani was mayor.
Here's the question. How is it that your father was in the mafia, your cousin was in the mafia, and you're in the U.S. Department of Justice? You can't be a cop and your father was in the mob. How do you get to the Department of Justice when your father was a known associate of organized crime in New York? That's the question that I've had for many years.
Why is it that they blame him for, well, they compliment him for cleaning up organized crime in New York? The fish market, wasn't he famous for cleaning that up?
Yes, they credit him with cleaning up the Fulton fish market and moving, being very hard on the gangsters and all. But I don't believe he got a conviction on John Gotti. He didn't get a conviction on John Gotti. The market was closed down. Everybody knew it was organized crime running it. Yeah. Organized crime has control over some of the kosher food market. Organized crime, and 1978, I was doing surveillance on John Gotti before he was the Teflon Don. We were surveilling John Gotti. The mafia was manufacturing subway tokens in 1978.
I'm not surprised.
And I was in South Ozone Park.
People don't realize how bad it was here in New York.
They're in so many things that you have no idea.
Well, they ran 42nd Street.
Oh, that too, the theaters, the theater market. You know,
decadence on 42nd Street.
But Giuliani was credited as being America's mayor, cleaning up things, but he also abused a lot of people. The squeegee men, remember the squeegee men?
Oh, yeah.
And the hard-nosed approach to crime. And don't forget, New York was in its most divided state under Giuliani. The anger and hostilities, and remember the riot he ran in front of City Hall with the cops against Mayor Dinkins. And Una Clark was going into City Hall, and the cops called her a nigger to her face. So these are the kind of people and events that have been stirred up by the likes of Giuliani and Trump.
Well, he had a protest for when the mayor, what's his name? Black mayor?
Dinkins.
Dinkins. I remember they had a protest outside of Dinkins' office when he was running. Yeah. When he would start to run for mayor. Well, we're still waiting for our guests. They should be here momentarily. But let's go back to the census and tell them the importance of this in voting. And that was another one of the topics we wanted to talk about is voting. It's an important time for us us as a people, to not sit back and support the Democrats.
There is.
We don't have a choice.
We have to. I remember when Barack Obama told the Congressional Black Caucus to put their boots on and get marching. Right. And Maxine Waters, he can't talk like that to us and blah, blah, blah. But the fact was, he was very much aware of the fact what these Dixiecrats were doing to restrict voting rights of people across the country.
What year was that?
It was after it was during his first
Obama
during his first term. Yes.
The Dixiecrats.
And those McConnell and all of them down in, the people down in Georgia.
Those are Republicans.
Oh, you're right. They're Dixiecrats. Thank you very much for the correction. The Republicans.
Yeah, the Republicans.
But the
they
fact
turned
was,
out like the Dixiecrats. It
and we saw just a month ago the voting rolls. Look at Georgia.
Yeah, well, Stacey Abrams should be
Stacey
governor.
Abrams, Martin Luther King's cousin, who was 90 years old, was told she can't vote. Her name has been wiped off the rolls. These are the things that we have to pay attention to.
Well, there are organizations out there trying to change it this year.
But people are going to have to be on top. You make sure that you have your voter registration card. When you go down to the polls to vote, you should have gotten a new card this past year. But make sure you have your card just in case. Another problem we have in New York, they do not purge the voter rolls. I have neighbors who have been dead 10 years, and they're still sending mail to them regarding the elections. So there isn't a connection between the Board of Elections and the Department of Health when people die to take those names off the rolls.
All right, did you get a chance to download item 3? Did you get a chance to download 3? I'd like you to play 3 if you get a chance. Huh? Did you download number 3? If you can run 3, be helpful.
Not yet, not yet.
Not yet? Well, run 4 for me. So we can get to our guests on the set. You have 4, Stanley? Okay.
Many of you know my story. My father left when I was 9 years old, but my mother made us keep studying. One point, she didn't have enough money to keep the lights on. She made us light a candle up and read. You got kids in your house that got all these smartphones that are watching foolishness. And there is a dumbing down of our children. I say often, Reverend Brown, there was a time when I was growing up and the punishment was go to your room. That's the worst thing to do now. Don't send them to the room. Because they got so many gadgets in the room. You don't know what they're doing in the room. In fact, they may want you to send them to the room. I went by a friend of mine's house, and I said, well, where's that? Wait, you got a son in the way? So, oh, he's in the room. In the room doing what he is. I think he's in there watching Power. I said, that ain't black power now. You better watch what he's watching. Get your powers mixed up. You're watching Empire. That ain't the Asante Empire. They plant in our children's head things that you need to know. Now, we need to know it. I watch all that stuff so I know what they're doing. But there seems to be a thread to say to our kids that unless you are street and thuggish and criminal, that you ain't black enough. And they define blackness by how low down you can be. Blackness was never about how low we could go. Blackness was always, no matter how far they pushed us down, we found a way to push back up. I remember when Dominique Nash was going to college, they started saying how people would tell them, if you spoke with a certain eloquence and studied a certain amount, you were acting white. But it was acting black. Don't ever let anybody define blackness with foolishness. Blackness was excellence. They were amazed. I had the author at National Action Network's convention last year, David Blight. They were amazed when Frederick Douglass, who was a runaway slave, got to New England and could stand up in Massachusetts and speak as eloquently as the most learned white man. So much so that the abolitionists, William Lloyd Garrison and others, were saying, you speak too well. Let us do the talking. Because of his thirst for knowledge and his thirst for excellence and his hunger and drive to affirm who God made him. The chains and the shackles that bound him couldn't stop him from being excellent anyhow. That's what blackness is.
Welcome back. Welcome to the show, Mary Sweeting, Esplanade neighbor, and she happens to be the mother of our favorite judge, Michelle Sweeney. That's one of the sweetest people I know,
Oh,
really.
thank you.
And to watch her, and she comes to legal night.
Yes.
Before she became judge, she was
Yes,
her
she
and
was an attorney.
Michael Hardy, and to see how she grew into that. Oh, that was such a joy to see that. And I have a piece on it I want to show you of her at legal night. Well, we have to wait till it gets downloaded. So,
Okay, no
but I'm sure you're a proud mommy.
Yes.
So how is it that you produce such such a beautiful child?
Well, they say that God is always in the mix.
Yes.
So that's
the
my
secret.
answer. Yes, that God
And a
is
product
always
of
in the
Esplanade
mix.
Gardens. I mean,
Yes. Originally, well, she grew up in the Polo Grounds,
right?
right? And so she's Harlem-born bred,
Yeah.
and lived in the Polo Grounds. Started. Let me see. I moved there back in 1967 or 68, and we left from there in 1980 and moved over to Esplanade Gardens.
Okay.
Moving on up
Yeah. Yes,
to
and that's
the east side.
Well, Esplanade Gardens is the greatest piece of property in Harlem, or
I
in Manhattan. Period.
agree, and I think that it's now receiving a lot of attention that may or may not be to Esplanade Gardens' advantage.
Right.
You have spectators that come around, and everyone's looking for the new horizon.
Right.
So it's considered the new frontier right about now.
It is.
And the view is phenomenal.
Right.
The rooms are large.
Right.
The grounds are spacious.
It's a beautiful
And with the
place.
capacity of 6 buildings comprising of 1,872 units, those are apartment units, with an in-ground swimming pool, commercial space,
Right.
park, near all transportation,
Right.
whether it be public in terms of the trains, the buses, and then of course you have the highways. You're skipping a throw from the Bronx,
Right.
from Yankee Stadium, going all the way into New Jersey. So it's a gold mine.
And what do you think about this? You were at the shareholders meeting.
Yes.
Now, I heard figures like $187 million going into this. They started off at 110. Now it's up to 187. Did I hear that right?
I think that you did hear it correctly, and that was one of the questions that I had posed
That's right.
to the accountant.
That's right.
Is that the accountability for the actual finances of what Esplanade Gardens' debt is and what its assets are should be given to the stockholders, and it should not
Exactly.
be given verbally. It should be placed on paper. It should be placed in the form of a stockholders meeting it was, and we had what was called the annual meeting.
Right.
And we were given a financial report, which I felt was inadequate. So that was the
was.
question
They didn't have the
that I
amount
had
of
posed.
arrears.
It did not have the amount of arrears listed.
How is that?
I don't know. If you was there, so you know
I
I
know,
did
I was
pose that
flabbergasted.
question. I posed that question. But with all due respect, Esplanade Gardens most recently, within the past 10 years, came under what we call management company. And prior to that, we were what we classified as self-managed.
Right.
And during that time, I served as the chair and CEO, president of Esplanade Gardens for off and on for about 10 years.
Okay.
And we were self-managed. So we had a fiduciary responsibility as board members to give transparency, accountability to the stockholders. During that time, we encountered a lot of problems. When I went on the board, we had a lot of fines. We were actually burning garbage. Yes, so we had to go from incineration to compactation. We had major elevators that were in bad condition. The roofs, the oil tanks, the electrical upgrade, the pool, there were a lot of problems, similar to what we have now. So I'm happy to see that there is some movement towards capital improvement. We had bulging bricks, things, all that, a lot of things.
Bulging bricks.
Bulging bricks are when bricks have
They-
that, right, when they actually start pulling away.
They will pull away from the
and
building,
pop out of the
fall
building.
on somebody, and
Yes.
kill somebody.
We had that, and those items were addressed.
How do we get the community to join hands and fight the outside coming in and taking over everything? I see this as a takeover move. Because the money is doubling all the time. And I noticed today they stopped the plumbing work in my
Yes,
building.
the plumbing work at Esplanade Gardens has come under question. I say for the past few years, there's a major problem that I've looked at in Building 1, where you can actually see the foundation. The steam of the water has been coming out of that building, so much to the bottom of the bricks are turning white. And they have had plumbers in on different occasions that were supposed to correct it. Now, to me, I think that is problematic. And whatever plumbing company that would come in, that would be one of the first items that I would ask them to address, is to look at that, because all of our piping is underground.
I thought they had fixed that problem.
Well, we've seen people
There was an
out there
attempt to do it.
on many occasions where it was supposed to have been corrected, but
Right.
it's still, as of today, is not corrected.
Bad plumbers?
I won't say bad plumbers. I just want to say whoever's gone in, I don't think that they really address the
How
problem.
about the choice of the contractors being the board picking the wrong contractor? I witnessed that just
Well,
the last year. I don't want to mention names, but, you know.
well, I'm very cautious in appointing or pointing fingers at board members. Having served on the board, as I said, for about 10 years, being self-managed, I know that being a board member,
It's a tough job.
it is a job that requires a lot of patience. It's a thankless job, and the essence is that whether you do good or you do bad, you're always going to have criticism. But it's your professionals that the board members have a responsibility to go out and search out,
Right.
to get people that are at the best, not the less amount of money to pay them, but those that are
that's-
competent and have a track record. And then, of course, you go through your bidding process, and you have people that will come in. You go to a physician, and you go to a heart physician, and you may vet 20 or 30 of them. But which one would you want? Would you want the one that got the A, that never went back to school for any updates? Or would you want the one that has the C, that's constantly getting updated and following through with what's new and what's better? And so those are some of the things that I think that board members' main responsibility is. And during my tenure, one of the things that I insisted was that board members went for training.
Yes.
Yeah.
At that time,
All right.
HPD and HUD offered courses on how to be a
Do
board
they
member.
still offer it?
I don't know if they still offer it. I know at one point in time, maybe about 2 years ago, I had inquired, and at that time they were not. HPD was not offering any courses.
See, that's very important. As a board member, there are a couple of things. You have the fiduciary responsibilities of looking after the financial stability of the site,
Yes.
and there is training on that.
Yes.
I went to Standard & Poor's on 42nd Street, and we took classes at Standard & Poor's on governance for non-for-profits. Your people have to be squeaky clean. The agency or the entity has to be the priority,
yes.
not what someone can hustle and get out of it on the side. And that's a major problem with a lot of non-for-profits. But with regard to housing now, I know the city is offering financial help to a lot of the HDFCs and other non-for-profit housing developments, but they in turn want to bring in their people
Exactly.
to manage your property
Exactly.
at your expense.
Exactly.
And when you have gotten to the point where you're established and independent of the city, that's where you're free. And they're trying to sucker the black developments to come back in and be under the city So the city then can control who does the work in the buildings.
Well, that's what's happening now.
And also the standards.
Okay.
Because you know you have a certain standard that's required. But that does not necessarily mean that's the best.
Okay.
And it does not necessarily mean that the standard that you're getting, even though you meet the code, is really what your development would be best at having. So those things are pretty much a great concern.
Okay.
And the other thing that I have a concern about right now that's happening in not only in Esplanade Gardens, but within the city, especially in Harlem, is that there is a push out.
Right.
It's a push out under the, from my personal viewpoint, under the auspices of affordable housing.
Thank you.
I don't like using the terminology affordable housing. I like to use the terminology livable housing.
Okay.
Livable housing. And as I stated earlier, Esplanade Gardens have large rooms. They have all of the amenities that you could imagine.
Yeah.
The new housing that's coming up, just recently, there's a development that was put up on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, a condominium, and they're starting over like $300,000, $500,000 for a one bedroom.
And the rooms are?
They're small. But they're attracting a different ethnicity, and they're attracting a different type of desire for housing. So the level of standard for us going back from Harlem being a flat railroad with the walking
Yes,
up
yes.
tenements
Yeah.
to having elevated apartments and apartments that have luxuries and views and gardens, they're pretty much, the developers are looking to go back, giving you less for more. And getting you to think that the amenity of having your little, small little dishwasher, your little small washing machine and dryer is the best way to go.
No.
But it's not.
You know, the gentrification, which in my term means black people get out, there will be another land grab in Harlem.
Well, that's what this is.
And it is for those large developments with the sizable rooms. You need to have a forensic audit done.
How do we prevent it?
You
Forensic audit?
have to get, the city has a list of CPAs for your non-for-profit entities. You can pull a CPA off of that list from the city and have a forensic audit done on the building. And I don't know how many years you may have to go back, but that forensic audit is key with regard to knowing where you are financially, or who siphoned what, who misappropriated what. You're talking about that steam pipe in the basement, is it?
It's actually underground, under the building.
Under the,
Under
Okay,
the buildings.
but my concern when you mention that is the foundation wall, because steam will erode the concrete.
Exactly.
Once that foundation wall is gone, you're going to have an issue with occupancy. Because the foundation, if the foundation is compromised, the weight that is sitting on the foundation of that building is going to become an issue. And then the city is going to say, oh, y'all got to get out.
I'm going to say something to you. In our last couple of meetings that we've had, that became a major concern for me.
okay.
And I think that I expressed that in my questions. And one of the things that I do at the stockholders meetings or the cooperators meetings is I try not to address the board members so as not to have division,
Right.
but to address the professionals that we pay.
That's right.
Your accountant, your corporate attorney, your landlord attorneys, your engineers. Not so much the contractors themselves, because they're coming, and as I told them the other day, they're there to make a profit. No matter what happens,
That's
they're going to
right.
make a profit.
Right.
That's right. I remember that meeting.
Several projects that have taken place that became problematic for me was they literally put bootstraps on our
Oh,
terraces
that was a waste of money.
about 7 years ago. And now they're coming in talking about all of the railing and all of this has to be removed. No one is talking about scrap metal. No one is talking about any type of restitution for the scrap metal that we're getting. Another area that bothered me a little bit was we used to have what they call the slop sinks
Yes.
inside of every floor.
Yes, by the
In
incinerator.
in the compact room. They have been removed. Now, I don't know how that affects the piping because they were once operable. Now, some people said because of maybe flooding, but I don't recall any of them having a flood problem. But given the water pressure in the event of a high rise, for a hose to have the pressure to come from the main floor downstairs, I would have thought that would have been something that we would have maintained, but I don't know. So those are questions that I have that we have not had an opportunity to raise in the contents of having people present to actually talk to them about it without them looking at, well, what's in it for me from the dollar sign, or can I put this as a part of the project?
Any thoughts about how we share this information to the shareholders? That's why I think a lot of the problems come from us not having the information. You know, the shareholders meeting very far and few between to actually get to the nit-grit of the problem. I'd love to see a shareholders union, some sort of community union where we can, you know, turn in our complaints.
Well, I think that the complaints are there. We had a structure that's in place, that still is in place, that may not be as operational as it could or should be, is we have building chairs
Okay.
for each building. So you would have
Okay.
each building with a building chair,
Okay.
and they would have a committee, and they would meet monthly, and even though they're one unit, they were 6 separate units. Therefore, you may have a unique situation
Right.
in one building because that building is closer to the water, you know, similar things like that. And the board of directors' responsibility was to hear from those. They were the antennas. The board was the mothership, so to speak. And the building chairs were the ships that came around to get advice. So it was a two-way discussion, feeding information, exchanging information, and respecting them, and allowing them to have their say. Each floor had a floor captain.
Yeah, we have that now, but it doesn't seem to be working out.
It may not be working, and I think it's because right now
It's the
we don't get
construction.
a list of who's moving in. I have not received a list of who's moving in. At one point, we knew who was moving in. At one point, when I moved into Esplanade Gardens, I was interviewed in my home where I was living at the time and scrutinized by members that was living in Esplanade that came
Right.
to my home
Really?
to see how I
How
kept
you
my
kept your place, right, before
and
you come
wanted
over there.
references for my to be able to move in.
This is Esplanade of the 80s.
Yes, that was the Esplanade Gardens of the 80s and the 90s. I don't
Oasis.
think they even do that anymore.
You know, what I'm really worrying about is succession rights
Oh, secession.
and the value of the co-op shares. Are our shares going to increase in value? I mean, these are points that have to be brought up to all of us so we feel safe in our homes.
Secession rights for me is a major concern, and it's basically because 3 years ago I sat in a meeting that was called by Borough President Gail Brewer and Letitia James,
Right.
and one of the topics that I had brought up at that time was about secession rights and about being a stockholder. We have all kinds of different types of housing. Speaking again about Esplanade Gardens is a Mitchell-Lama.
Absolutely.
Right?
We're stockholders.
Right.
We don't pay rent.
You're not renters, right?
We're not renters. And I think that the education of going back to the basics, of having people that move in to understand that you're not a renter, you are a stockholder with a maintenance obligation. which means if my neighbor's apartment has a problem, I need to be concerned about it, not being in their personal business, but concerned because that problem will eventually come to me as a stockholder, which affects all of us. I think that cooperative living, too many at this point don't understand the essence of cooperative living.
Everybody
Now-
comes home, goes in their apartment,
And right,
goes to work,
Is-
comes home, goes in their
and
apartment.
they don't want to be involved. And I can understand the privacy because I'm private. I'm not one that really do a lot of home entertainment to that nature, but I think I'm pretty known in the community, and I respect my neighbors. But I'm concerned about what happens. We have issues, a lot of issues that I don't think are unmanageable, but I think that we need to address them differently.
Okay.
Very differently. We have 24-hour security. We have a management company that's, to no disrespect to them, but when are they there to manage? Esplanade Gardens operates 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The needs are still there. So if you have a management company that comes in at 8 or 9 and they're gone by 5, not there on the weekends, not there on the holidays, and then now with extended holidays because of whom they're hired by, so they're getting the regular 12 holidays and then some. Who's actually managing us? Is not the need on a Monday the same as the need on a Sunday? Or
Most certainly.
you understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
And we're paying a lot more money.
Well, it's less than the old management company.
Yeah, true.
A lot less.
True, it's a lot less, but if we were
$300,000 less.
right, if we were paying the other management company that amount of money, and we're paying less, do we now say that we still want the best service that we could possibly get? And I still don't think that that's what's happening. I think that there's a learning curve for them to know what's happening in Esplanade. We're a major employer. And I don't think people ever look at the fact that Esplanade Gardens is an
Right.
employer.
It's a small city.
We have, that's right,
It
a
is.
small city. We have like about, 52 maintenance
It
personnel.
was more than that.
It may be more. It used to be 52 when I was there, you know, as the president. It was 52, and that just included maintenance. That was just the maintenance staff, and they're unionized, so there's compliance, and then you hire a security company. So you're a major employer. As a board member,
We have
that's
15
serious.
seconds left for Manhattan. We have another. Thank you for coming
Thank you
to
for
the
inviting
Gilchrist
me.
Experience, those of you in Manhattan. And the God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned for more. Power to the people. We've got a minute more for the Bronx. Thank you for coming, Mary.
Thank you for
We have to
having
do
me.
this again
Yes,
and
and
get more in depth of what's
let's just
can
pray.
unite us.
I am a prayer warrior.
Okay.
I believe that the power of prayer, and I believe that one of the things that I'm looking forward to, Esplanade Gardens just had recently a successful election. They had over 21
Candidates.
candidates, and there were 7 board seats available. And I just pray that the persons that have gone in will really look at taking their skills and using them for the
Okay.
betterment of Esplanade,
Amen.
and not being afraid to step up and hold positions that are required.
That's it.
Not everyone needs to be president. You need secretaries, you need a treasurer,
Right.
and then you need to have transparency.
Amen. Especially transparency. Here you have it again. Power to the people. And pray for Esplanade.
Yes.
We took the courses. My wife's a broker,
Oh, yeah.
and we've been in real estate a long time.
Also
but
the RAB.